Howdy y'all, and welcome back for another episode of the Kireth Esports Drift University. My name is Nader, and in today's episode, I have my friend Ted on that was willing to help share everything he knows about how to tune a drift car. It's definitely a lot of information in a long video, so I'll try to keep this intro short. Before we start though, if you enjoyed this video, I really hope that you drop a like and hit that subscribe button for more drifting content in the future. One more thing that I gotta say before we get this started. During the whole video, you're gonna see a tuning sheet. I will say it's a pretty decent tune, but it's not necessarily something that's gonna work well in competitions for you. If you want something that's gonna be more competitive, I'd recommend trying the tunes at the end of the video. But without further ado, let's let Ted take it away, and I hope you enjoyed the video.
When it comes to drift tuning, every aspect of the tuning is very important, but in a very different way to how racing is. So your PP points, completely ignore that for drifting. It's not going to be relevant at all, because it's almost going to be things that make your drift car better are going to make your PP worse. So for starters, ignore that. First of all, you're going to want comfort hards. That's what everyone runs, or at least 90% of people run. You know, anyone who doesn't run it, well, they're doing their own thing, but most people who are getting tandems and good drift, good doors, they're all on comfort hards. Starting in the suspension, the ride height, I personally, this is all my personal preference of how I like to have the car set up. Everyone is going to be different, but this is how I think a good setup is for me, and I know it is for a lot of people. Generally speaking, raised front end by maybe like 10, 20, maybe 30 clicks in the front. Pretty much a slammed rear end. At max, I'll raise the rear end 10 clicks. Depends if I want a bit more squishiness in the rear, because sometimes the suspension travel isn't enough in the rear to get that squat. And having the raised front end is going to help with self-steer and also putting more weight over the rear, so you're going to spin out less. Anti-roll bars, you're going to want that stiffer front, so your steering is a bit more pointy and direct, so your steering inputs are going to be direct to what you're doing a bit more, so you don't have a bit of sloppiness in the front. Versus the rear, you want it a bit more sloppy, so going down to like 5 to 2, and somewhere in that range of anti-roll bars in the rear, and somewhere from like 6, 7, 8 in the front. So in the rear, having it softer is going to mean when you throw the car in, it's going to roll in the rear and really squat onto that rear and grip up, rather than if it's stiffer, your momentum is going to go straight to the tyre and it's going to help you spin out a lot easier, and you're not going to be able to catch a car as easy as having it softer. Compression, generally, I have reasonably even between the two. Compression, I'll maybe go like low to mid 30s in the front and about the same in the rear. Depends on the car, depends on the rest of the tune, but somewhere in that bracket. Have a stiffish in the front. It's going to help with, it's kind of going to be the same with the other two, the anti-roll bar. Having a stiff compression in the front is quite similar to the rest of the suspension, having it stiffer in the front. Compression is how fast it compresses. So if you've got it stiffer in the front and you throw it in, it's not going to immediately squat, and it's going to slowly compress, which is going to help with your exact steering inputs and help with the counter steer. Not having it too soft in the rear means that at least when you're on throttle, your throttle inputs are more direct to how you're going. Having it stiffer can sometimes mean, well, obviously it's stiffer, so it's going to, when you throw it in, your car's going to want to over-rotate more, but there's a correct balance to that, because the rest of the rear, for me personally, is quite soft, so just having that one stiffer allows me to still get a bit more grip out of the car, because I don't want it too soft, so it just floats and has no grip and I can't keep up with people. Expansion is how fast it expands or rebounds. So having it nice and stiff in the front, bouncy, it bounces back nice and quick counter steer. The suspension stays quite level in the front, so it's always doing a very predictable, similar thing. Having it softer in the rear is what I love. I know some people like it stiffer because then it rebounds faster in the rear and helps you transition really fast, but then sometimes it transitions too fast and you'll over-rotate on transition. And then mid-corner, the rear suspension won't stay as compressed and not as much weight over the rear wheels, which is what I like. I like to just go bang on the throttle all the way around the corner, or if I'm blipping the throttle, going ba 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 with the throttle, it means that the suspension isn't going to be as up and down per each throttle, so it's going to stay more leveled and balanced through the corner and help me just float on a nice smooth line around the corner. Similar in the natural frequency, having it stiffer in the front, obviously as well, but this helps with the steering, helps with the predictability, and then the rear nice and soft, So front, I'll go for anywhere from about 2.2 to 2.5 in the front. I know plenty of people who go way stiffer than that, but then they'll match it in the rear because I'll go anywhere. Lowest I'll go maybe like 1.7 in the rear. Highest I'll go is like 2.0, maybe 2.1 in the rear, depending on if I really want a stiff car and if it's a low horsepower car trying to get it sliding. But sometimes it's too stiff and it'll spin out, and it's all just personal preference, figuring out what you like. Camber and toe both help a lot with how much steering angle you can get and how much lock. Camber, your wheels rotate, or they turn over themselves as they're going to lock. So a leading tire is going to then become positive camber, even if it is initially negative, especially if it's a low amount of camber because it rolls over itself. So having a higher negative camber in the front is going to mean your tire is flatter at a higher rate of angle, therefore having more grip in the front and still having that control over the car at max angle rather than only having it at lower amounts of angle. And rear camber, I always pretty much run 0, maybe like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. That's just if I want an extra tiny bit more slip in the car, but I like to have the full contact patch of the tire on the ground at all times. That's just how I like driving. Some people like a bit of camber in the rear for a lot more wheel speed, and it just spins them up a lot more for lower horsepower cars. Not my taste. Some people run it. I don't. Toe angle in the front, always have it out in the front. Always, always, always. I run mine on average about out 0.50 to 0.40, somewhere in that range. It's not too much out, not too much in. So that's going to mean that lead tire is going to have more angle, but the chasing tire in mid-drift is going to have slightly less angle. But because most of the weight on the front tires are going to be on that leading tire, that's going to be on getting the grip, and because it's at more angle, it's going to help you get more grip. But if you have too much toe, that chasing tire might start to drag a bit too much, and then it might drag your front end around and start to like grip up and then spin you around. So not having too much toe is good, but also some cars, having a lot of toe is also good because it helps you catch big entries. If you want to throw big reverse entries, a lot of toe and a lot of front camber can always help. A real soft rear end to catch it. Those things will help with the big angle, but it might not be as smooth and fluid throughout the whole corner. Rear toe, generally, 90% of the time you want it in. If you ever have it out in the rear, that's only because you're in a very slow, in a very low powered car and you're struggling to get it sideways. Because toe in is going to help you pull to the inside of the corner, versus toe out is going to help you wash wide, but it's also going to make you spin out more toe out. So toe out, you might only ever run it on, like in real life, on a banked track like Irwindale Speedway, where you need to stay up on that high bank. Whereas if you have a lot of toe in, it's going to pull you to the inside of the corner and down the bank. But obviously you're not really drifting any bank tracks on this game. It's all flat pretty much. So generally having toe in is going to help you with a tiny little bit more grip, pulling you to the inside, hitting those areas that you want to get and surging up on people's doors a bit nicer. Differential, you pretty much just want it locked, 60, 60, 60. It's going to mean both wheels are going to be spinning at the exact same speed at all times. Sometimes people like to have it slightly open or like very open, but that's their personal preference. I don't like it because I like my rear wheels to be very predictable. It makes the car a lot more predictable because they're going to be the exact same at all times. Versus an open diff, sometimes you don't know how each side of the car is going to react. Sometimes it acts a bit funny and grips up in weird ways, and you might straight in or over angle or do something funny because of the open diff. But sometimes it can give you more grip and a bit of an advantage. It's a very hit and miss thing having an open diff. It's something I would not recommend because it just makes the car a little more unpredictable and it's just not as nice of a driving experience. Downforce, you're drifting, not racing. You don't want to grip up with downforce and understeer and smack into the person in front of you. You want to be able to float out nice beside them and not grip up and surge up on their doors. Sometimes you might want that, but you don't want too much of it, especially if you run into a slower driver in a lobby on Suzuka East or something like that. Someone who's a bit less experienced. You don't just want to be ramming them out of the way and passing them constantly. You want to be able to get nice tandems, nice doors. So I'd say I don't really ever run any more than 150 downforce in the front or 200, 250 in the rear. Anything more than that, I think, is a bit ridiculous for drifting. You don't need it. You at that point, you're drifting just for speed. I mean, if you are just drifting just for speed, go ahead, put all the downforce in the car you want, but it's going to unsettle the car. It's going to make your steering a lot heavier, especially if you have a lot more downforce in the front. You're going to feel that weight on the front end. Having that bit less downforce. It's just going to make the car feel nice, light, floaty, easy to drive. Just a better experience. Power, it's up to you. What do you want to run? What car do you want to run? It really depends. I can drift a car that's got like 200 horsepower. I can drift a car that's got 1200 horsepower. It all depends on how you want to drive the car. I personally like about 500 to 650 horsepower. Anywhere in that range I think is perfect for me. It can pretty much do anything, and especially with cars with smaller tires, you don't want as much power because you're just going to light the wheels up and you're going to get no grip. Like in my Skyline hardtop, that thing makes I think 330 horsepower with the low RPM turbo. I could never run more horsepower in that car because it just spin up the wheels too much, and it just want to loop out too much because it doesn't have the rear grip to match the power. Versus a car like my RCF, I can run like 600-700 horsepower and be just fine because it's got the rear tire and I'm not going to spin out. Or the BRZ drift car, huge rear tire, it's got huge power, it's got a really nice steering lock kit. You can run almost any tune on that car and it will feel amazing. And it just drifts everything with 1200 horsepower. It doesn't spin out unless you're still learning. I mean, unless you mess up, but it's a very hard car to spin out. Gear ratios, generally, if you're ever looking at your gears, you want it to be reasonably even gaps between the gears. And you don't want gears too short, you don't want them too long, but generally, controller drifters are going to have slightly shorter gears than wheel drifters, because wheel drifters can just stick it in one gear and just go the whole track easily. They can drift at any wheel speed a lot easier than controller drifters can. So having slightly shorter gears and being able to go up and down through the gears a lot easier on controller makes it controlling the wheel speed and controlling how much grip you have, how much wheel speed units spin out. It makes controlling these things a lot easier. I've got a gearbox that I'm sure Nita is showing on screen right now that's built for lower horsepower cars. I run it in my Skyline hardtop, as you can see. And then I've got a gearbox here that I run in my RCF, which is built for grippier cars, which run in higher horsepower grippier cars, because they can spin the wheels to a higher wheel speed. But you don't want the gears too long in higher horsepower cars, because otherwise you get too much wheel speed and you can't get rid of that wheel speed and you're just going to spin out or have too much wheel speed and can't transition. Upgrades, I mean, chuck a turbo on if you want, chuck a supercharger. I generally will run low RPM turbo because I like the torque, I like the immediate throttle response, which makes the car easier to drive. Because if you put your foot down, you're going to get the power. High RPM, it's going to have that little bit of lag to it. It might have a tiny bit more grip initially. When you get on throttle, you might be at a kind of lower angle because the wheel speed hasn't built up yet. But then as the power pours on, it'll pour back into more wheel speed, and it's a bit harder to control at an exact angle and be a bit smoother with it. So I personally like medium or low RPM turbo. Intake, exhaust, manifold, all of those, just chuck on racing, chuck on whatever you want really. Brakes, generally it just depends on how heavy footed you are with the brakes and what you like. In newer cars, I'll just run the stock brakes because they're good. Older cars, I'll run either racing or sports, depending on how grippy the car is itself. Always handbrake, always get the drifting handbrake. Brake balance, I would highly recommend that you run negative brake balance. Because that means when you get on the brake, if you're left foot braking mid-drift, that means that you're slowing the car down with the front wheels, but you're not slowing the rear wheel speed down, so you're still staying in drift. So if you're trying to follow someone and you're in a faster car, it means you can still maintain a lot of wheel speed while slowing your car down at the same amount of steering angle and still follow them. Whereas if you have a positive brake balance and you're slowing your rear wheels down when you're braking, you're slowing your rear wheels down, you're slowing your wheel speed, which is giving you more grip. Because low wheel speed is going to give you more grip and you're not going to be able to stay as sideways. I'd recommend for beginners maybe -2, -3. I personally run -4. It's a bit harder to control because the front brakes lock up a lot, but I've been using -4 on Gran Turismo since about 2018 and I've loved it all throughout. So that's just me personally. If you want to run that, run it. Obviously steering angle kit, and I always use a racing clutch because you want to be shifting through the gears fast, and also a fully customizable racing transmission. Just because you want fast shifting gears. You don't want lag between gears and have to straighten out between gears because you're clutching for so long. And that's how I'd recommend tuning. You obviously can run almost anything as a drift tune and drift it. It's just a lot harder, a lot less fluid. It's not as easy to tandem with, you know. I just think this is a good bass tune. Do what you want with it. Yeah.
Alrighty, and that's going to do it for this episode of the Kireth Esports Drift University. I hope y'all were able to learn a lot from that, because I definitely know I learned so much from talking and making this video. Also, I really appreciate y'all making it to the end if you got this far. And, as I promised at the beginning of the video, I've got a few different tunes that Ted sent over to me to put into the video. So I'll just drop those here for y'all. And again, thank y'all so much for watching and making this far. If you haven't already, I really appreciate it if you dropped a like and subscribed. And I'm really looking forward to making the next video. I think I'm probably going to do something like a track guide where I show y'all some good clipping points. So drop the tracks that you want to learn in the comments down below, and maybe we'll hit that one up. But again, thank y'all for watching, and peace out.